Okay, are you ready? Okay. Hi, Jackie. How are you? Welcome to Women's Circle.
Hi, Polly. Thanks for having me. Such an honour to be invited.
The honour is all mine. And I think it would be really nice to set the scene of how we came together tonight so that we can diminish any idea that this is a glossy, like perfect mama type scenario. We were both putting our children to bed very successfully. As you can see, Ziggy is still sitting next to me, and at least one of us has their hair done. So it ain't me.
But only because I had a hair appointment yesterday and they very lovely ladies straightened it for me, and I have tried to keep it as many days as possible.
Oh, well, it's
the only time it's ever done nicely.
It looks fabulous. I mean, even getting to get it washed is like a luxury, isn't it?
Mm-hmm, absolutely. I didn't used to like it, and then I became a mum, and now I'm like, okay, someone wash me.
It's totally touch my head.
I know. Just do something.
It's so true. Very cool. Well, I think we should start by getting to know you a little bit, and I guess let everyone know that we've known each other for a very long time,
yes.
Since primary school. So I don't know, step us through your journey, Jackie, where kind of, your childhood, where you grew up, because what I like to do is get a sense of your childhood from your perspective, and then when we start getting into motherhood, how you can see that shaping how you are today.
Okay. So I'm no. I grew up in Alice Springs, actually. So it's for those who don't know, Alice Springs is a very remote desert town in the middle of Australia. It has a very small population of about 30,000. It's about 16 hours drive from Darwin. So when I say remote, it's very remote. And I was born there, and in fact lived there till I was almost 10, when my parents then moved us to Brisbane, which is when I met you in primary school. And then I spent most of my high school years here in Brisbane. I did university here in Brisbane, and then as most of us Aussies do, I went on the famous gap year that we all love over in London, and hung around there for 5 years before embarking on my motherhood journey back in Australia. So been around.
What a journey it's been. And before you got into motherhood, I think, if I remember correctly, you weren't that interested.
Yeah, actually, it's a funny journey. I remember, as you do when you move out of your parents' homes, and we're part of the boomerang generation. Perhaps we do go back.
Yeah.
And so on one of the couple of trips that I had back into my parents' home, I was asked to clear out some boxes. One of which was full of my old journals and diaries from growing up. And at the ripe old age of 12, apparently all I wanted to be was a mum. And when I read this only a few years ago, it shocked me a little bit. And then I actually remembered what had happened since then. And it was a very interesting journey. I remember having quite a young mum myself. She was 24 when she had me, and I remember her being just up and really beautifully there. She was always involved. I remember lots of hugs and cuddles, and we didn't have any other family around when I was growing up. They all lived in northern New South Wales. We were in Northern Territory, so there was a big divide there. But Mum had built up, after having children, built up a beautiful community of women that she knew that had children. We shared nannies and babysitters, and so I think I grew up in a really, maybe it was sheltered, I don't know, but it was a beautiful, growing up, a childhood. And so I think that I really wanted to be a mum, and I wanted to be a young mum, a cool mum where I could be friends with my kids, which I thought was quite interesting. So this was me at 12. And then when I was about 13 or 14, I was diagnosed with ovarian cysts, and it was quite confronting. I think no one really gave me all of the information that I needed. And at the time, I remember this gynecologist just sliding a pamphlet across the table to me and my mom, who were sitting there, being told what it was about, or some of what it was about. And it was, here's an option if you want to freeze your eggs. You might have difficulty having children.
Wow, at 13.
Yeah, and so it was quite an interesting journey, because I remember mum was umming and ahhing, and of course I went on the contraceptive pill at that age, even though it wasn't needed for anything other than to control hormones and ovarian cysts. And so I think from then on I kind of just went, right, well, if that's not in my future, then it's not in my future. I'm going to have this awesome career. And I really kind of flipped my perspective a little bit. And so having children wasn't a priority anymore. And that was quite an interesting journey, actually, because I'd gone from having, this one, I suppose, maternal instinct desire to something completely different of, well, if I have kids, I might adopt. And that was, I suppose, always my preference until, my darling husband, drunk one night at a party in our late 20s, went, no, I definitely want kids before I'm 30. And I went, oh, shit, hello. Is that something I should have known?
Wow. So did he instigate children?
I mean, I suppose it was always, we had talked about, one day if we have kids, but to me it was always one of those things in the far future, or, it wasn't something I was counting on, I suppose, before 30. And so, yeah, it was kind of, he'd started the ball rolling, and then I kind of went, oh, well, maybe it is the time, maybe we could do it, maybe it would work. And yeah, so I was 31 when I had Arthur.
Do you think that's an interesting, do you think that is the general norm, that the masculine, the male, whatever configuration you're in, is like, yeah, I'm stepping up and saying I want to have kids? I haven't heard that so much. I usually hear that it's the female saying it's time, we need to have the children.
I mean, I think ultimately it was him like planting the seeds and the idea of it. But it was probably me going, right, well, how about I go off the pill at this time, and then we try, at this point. So it was probably me implementing the idea, but which is actually very unusual for our relationship. I'm generally the person who is the ideas person. I have 100 projects started at any one time, but he's the completer finisher in our life. So thank God, or else nothing would have door handles in our kitchen,
Classic maximizer and minimizer.
I know. So yeah, I mean, maybe it is quite unusual, but yeah, I don't know. It was very interesting. I probably wouldn't have pushed for it unless he had said something. So yeah, maybe it is unusual.
I understand the ovarian cyst journey. I've been on the same path as you and so many women.
Yeah.
Goodness.
So many.
And so I'd like to kind of, I guess, get into that a little bit. Like, at what point, you said you managed it, you've had it since you were a teenager, and you managed it by going on the pill. Did you find that effective? Did you have to have surgery? Like, what's your journey been? Because I think that's really helpful for other women.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I probably really relied on my mum having a medical background. So she was a nurse when I was growing up, and then has done master's, PhD, etc. Is now an epidemiologist. But because she has that medical knowledge, I think there was a lot that I really relied on her for. And so I was in a very fortunate position where she was, in fact, in contact with, all the big wigs, I suppose, in Brisbane, in terms of ovarian cancer and things. She'd worked on these types of projects. And so when these things arise, she kind of, got me in to see people, and they talked a lot of stuff. But being young and probably not understanding or realizing I could ask questions, I think I kind of went into a lot of stuff a bit blindly. But they did prescribe the pill, and so I did go on that. And it was years later when someone picked up and went, "Oh, you have a history of migraines. You actually can't be on that pill. Here's the mini pill." So it was very interesting though that no one sat down with me and spoke with me about my choices and what I wanted from it, or explained to me in black and white. And in fact, that's a journey I'm going through at the moment, because I'm still, last month had a scan on my left ovary, which is still giving me issues with these ovarian cysts. And there's one in particular that we're watching, which might cause issues down the track. So I've never had surgery on my ovarian cysts. However, I have had surgery. I had a cone biopsy to remove SIN3, which is a form of the HPV virus on my cervix. So this was in a time when the vaccine for the cervical cancer had just been introduced or released to the public, and unfortunately we were of that age group where we just missed out on getting those vaccines, those miracle jabs, when we were in high school, and they offer it to all girls now, which is fantastic. But having missed out on that, I then had to go through the process of, having the smear, being told that it was that there was something wrong, ignoring the letters because I didn't think anything of it. A year later, having a second one and being told, actually, no, we have to remove this. So that was a surgery I had to go through. And again, I think I was 21 maybe at the time, and thinking, well, this is great. Because I said, well, depending on how your cervix recovers, it could also impact being able to have a child or keep a child, and so all these things were playing on my mind, I think, as I went into, do I want to be a mum kind of thinking. And then finally, when we did decide that we wanted to go down the having children journey, how is all of my history going to affect it? Are ovarian cysts going to impact? Should I have been investigated for endometriosis when they mentioned that when I was 16? Should I have done the laparoscopy? Is that an option that, was available to me? And so I suppose it's been a confusing journey for me, because I feel like I probably didn't do the research, or I probably didn't take ownership of my body and understood that I could have done that. And I don't know if that's anyone's fault in particular, but, it's certainly something I'm learning now in my 30s, that I can, I've got autonomy, I've got ownership over my body. I can choose not to be on the pill. I can choose to, maybe go explore other paths or solutions, or, do the surgery or not. So
isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Journey. So now you've decided to have children, and you're in London at the time, and you weren't thinking so much about the cysts, you just went for it, and surprise, that easy?
Yeah. It was a bit of a surprise, actually. I suppose we've been trying 2 or 3 months. Our biggest surprise, though, were our friends in Australia calling us up going, well, cat's out of the bag, we're pregnant. And we went, oh, okay. And we hadn't told them that we were trying. And so that day I went out and got a pregnancy test, and I was also pregnant. And so I didn't realize it was going to happen, I suppose, as quick as all that, because I had been led to believe that it might take some time. And it was probably why we started the fun stuff when we were in London, because we knew that if we'd had any issues, I had seen some professionals over there. I had a gynecologist who was investigating an ovarian cyst that had burst about 2 years earlier. So I knew I had those connections, and I had a doctor who was listening to me. And if there was any complications, I could go to him and probably have more of an informed conversation with him, with the person I felt comfortable with. Yeah. So starting our journey in London was mainly because of that, because I thought, well, I've got that medical support here with the history, should I need it. So that was quite interesting. And but yeah, it wasn't, we were very lucky that it wasn't a arduous process or Anything?
So you have conceived this baby in London. You were like kind of happy to do that because you had specialists there that had looked at what you were going through and you felt kind of safe there, I guess. And what was it like to kind of go through the English system and then swap to the Australian system? Because actually we should get to your birth because it was really interesting.
Yeah. I consider myself one of probably the most fortunate people to go through pregnancy with the support that I had outside of the medical services that were offered to me. And I say that because as soon as we found out we were pregnant and we told our families, so it was around Christmas time and it was, all lovely and wonderful. My mother immediately went, great, as soon as Sue will contact you, they'll be in contact. And so I'm very fortunate. My godmother and my mother's best friend in high school is Sue Kildare, and she's a professor of midwifery, and I've known her my whole life. So she immediately went, great, don't read any of the books. They're all depressing. They have great information, but they're not written in a nice way. I'll send you a book and I want you to read it. I said, great. And so she sent me this book called Gentle Birth, Gentle Mothering. And the biggest difference about this book is that it's written by an Australian GP who has home birthed 4 children. So she's a woman, she's Australian, and she is a doctor or a physician even, I think. And she has done all of this evidence-based research and provided it in a beautiful way in her book. So it's a really a very touching story. She's got anecdotes and stories of her own home births in there, but all of this very factual. If you decide to have an epidural, this is how that comes about. This is what it means for you. This is the impact long term and short term on you and your baby. And she's gathered all of this research in a really nice way. And so to read that, it was really empowering. And at first I was kind of, oh, it's all, go vaginas and very, trying to give that really strong feminine message. And so I was kind of a bit taken back at first, but then I really bought into that. And it really gave me the courage, I suppose, to take ownership of that process. It's the first time I kind of went, yeah, this is my body, and this is, I should ask all the questions I can ask and understand everything I can so that I can make the right choices for me and my baby and our family. And what was very interesting is that I didn't find much of that support in the medical services offered to me. So the first GP I saw, I think I was 6 weeks, and he went, oh, okay, you can't do any travel. You have to eat only soup, so only liquids, because it helps with heartburn. You can't travel, you can't go on an airplane, and you can't do, you should be at home resting as much as you can. And I went, well, I'm flying from London to Iceland in a week, and then I go to Canada for New Year's Eve where I was going to go skiing, and I'm also going on a zip line and snowmobiling. And he went, no, you're not. So luckily I had this resource, my gynecologist, who I called up and I said, hey, mate, I'm being told all this stuff. And he was like, that's ridiculous. Of course you can eat more than soup. You need energy, you need food, you need to eat the right foods. And it was just so amazing that I was having these 2 completely different conversations with medical professionals. And my midwife, when I was finally assigned a midwife, so after about 12 weeks, I think, I saw a midwife. And again, I just felt like I was a number. And I'm not saying that all medical professionals are like this, because they're definitely not. But I just found it very interesting. I'd ask questions and she kind of looked at me and went, yeah, we'll talk about it later. We'll talk about it, So when? Oh, when you're 35 weeks. I said, what if I have a baby at 34 weeks? She went, oh, no, it doesn't happen. And I felt very dismissed and perhaps not heard. So I was so grateful that I had my mum, who I could ask questions of, who'd had 3 children, obviously herself. My godmother, who was a midwife, her partner, who is also a midwife and child health nurse. And so I had these beautiful, amazing, strong women in my life who I could really draw their energy and their good stories from.
Yeah.
yeah, and so I suppose that was my journey. And then
Yeah.
moving to Australia, they helped me get into a midwifery group practice here in Australia, in Murwillumbah District Hospital, in fact, which was all very cozy and a bit funky, and 70s LED light lamps and all kinds of beautiful things. And that was where I birthed Arthur. So he arrived
In
10
water,
days late.
didn't he?
Yeah.
In a water birth.
So I was very fortunate that, I was low risk. Everything was progressing beautifully. I probably fudged the due dates a little bit because I didn't want to be, I suppose, forced into going through an induction. And so having done some research and having support, I kind of thought, well, there's two dates that they questioned, and so I kind of gave the later one. So he was probably more 10 days late than anything. But I was very fortunate that I had the water birth. So it was, if I'm honest, beautiful. It was, of course, there was pain, but I felt that I was ready. I felt confident in my body and my body's ability. And I was just really able to go with it. And I think there was certainly one point where I just looked over and went, I'm not doing this again. I'm glad I'm here, but it's not happening again. And another point.
The confidence in your body point, do you think that, like, as in just having that confidence to birth, would you say that that's come from you just having confidence within yourself always, or from the care that you had during pregnancy? Because I don't think I think that's a big fear for a lot of women.
Absolutely. I don't know. I know perhaps I do think I come across as a confident person, but I don't feel like I'm a confident person in my general life. I do feel that I was confident in my ability to birth, because, well, there's two reasons. Yes, because I was given, or I had the support, and I went out and sought support that fit with my worldview, I think. So I also went to Yoga Baby, that's offered at Milton at Auckland Flower.
Active birth. Yeah.
And we did the active birth class with her, and that was the only class we did because we were in transition between London and Australia. We weren't offered any kind of services where we could go and learn these things. So that was the only birth class that we ever went to. I actively avoided anyone who spoke negatively, or who went, oh, did you hear about my cousin, or my brother's sister, my brother's wife, or whatever. And people kept coming up with these incredible dramatic horror stories of things that had happened, and I would say that's sad, or my gosh, I'm glad that she has a beautiful baby, or whatever, but please, I don't really want to know much more. Tell me the good story.
Compelled to deliver those
drama. We love the drama. You slow down when there's a car accident on the side of the road to you need them to find out what's going on. You watch the sad news, the depressing news, not the good stuff.
You tell the pregnant lady about our horror stories.
I know.
Yeah.
It's kind of like you're in this club now. It's like, oh, you're pregnant. Well, let me just tell you about all the bad things.
Let me just tell you. So, okay, so so you've had some issues with cysts, ovarian cysts. You can get pregnant quite easily. You have a baby quite easily. It's been a beautiful birth. Post-birth, how are you feeling?
So unbeknownst to me, I did hemorrhage. And again, it's interesting, right? Again, in midwifery group practice, so for those who don't know, there are different options available, and this is all in most parts of the world. And I didn't know the options available because no one had told me until my godmother had said, make sure you do the research. Most women do more research on the new family car or the bigger fridge that they're going to buy when they're expanding their family than they do about their own pregnancy and birth. And I was like, really? Like, yeah. And then as she was telling me this, as I was researching the new car that we were going to buy. And I went, that's insane. Why don't we have more information about what's available to us? So, you know, I was able to, I suppose, understand what the midwifery group practice would offer me. And I found that, and growing up with midwives around me, that was what I wanted to do. So I didn't see a single obstetrician except for my first gynecologist that I saw at the very beginning, who assured me that travel was okay. And I only saw midwives, but, you know, some were good, some weren't great, and some didn't give me probably the information I needed. So post-birth, about 2 days after my birth, when I had a home visit from one of the other midwives on the service, she actually said, had you been in my care, I would have sent you to the hospital, which was about 45 minutes drive away in an ambulance. And she said, you hemorrhaged quite a lot. You've lost quite a lot of blood. And I was sitting there going, oh, I thought all women felt like this after birth. And she was like, they can, but also you've lost a lot of blood. You have to take, you know, really good care of yourself. We need you to go get blood tests. Here, take some iron tablets. Wow. And the other midwife had kind of been very much like, no, you're great. See you later. Have a good life. 4 hours after giving birth, escorted us to our car and let us go home with a baby.
Stop.
Yeah. So that was interesting. I mean, different medical professionals and midwives and whoever else having different opinions of what your body can and can't handle. And my body ended up being fine after that. But I think it did probably mean I was recovering for a little bit longer than I wanted to be. So there's a few weeks there where I was just drained. I had no energy. And I mean, new mum, right? Like, that's normal. Though with the blood loss, it probably didn't help. So it was trying to understand and navigate this new world and sleepless world, you know, to some extent, because even if your baby is sleeping, aren't you watching them like a hawk to make sure they still are?
Mm-hmm. And like,
I remember
still sleeping, baby.
Yeah, our baby slept. He was amazing, but I was awake all the time going, is he sleeping? Is he still breathing?
Yeah.
So, you know, I don't know if all mums do that, but I did.
Yeah, they do. They just they go to sleep and they hear a noise and they think it's a baby, and like.
And babies are loud sleepers as well. They grunt and they fart and they
grunty things, aren't they?
Yeah.
So you apart from the hemorrhaging, you felt pretty good, and how like, and you've had a second baby since.
Yeah.
Did you feel like you had a lot more resources and understanding to go through the second one and do it similar, different? How did that go?
It's interesting, isn't it? Because even though, so the second time round, even though I felt really empowered by my first birth, and, you know, like I would do it again, if I'm honest. Like, I would probably do it a few more times, but my body won't actually handle the actual pregnancy. It's not the birth that's the problem, it's the pregnancy for me. I've since pregnancy, since having my second child, found out that I'm hypermobile, which is why I had the pelvic girdle pain and couldn't walk for 6 months during pregnancy. So the body's an amazing thing, but also a painful thing sometimes, right? But, you know, it's all a bit of a learning curve. But during my second pregnancy, I really wanted to employ a doula, so a private midwife, and birth at home. And that was my ideal birth plan, or birth ideal. And so that's what I wanted to do. And I didn't do it mainly because the people around me, in particular my husband, and probably a few other people, were not comfortable with that idea. And so I didn't pursue it. Also, there's only, I think, 4 or 5 regions in Australia that allow, or at the time allowed, home births within the public system. So to get a doula for all the insurances and everything, it costs an absolute fortune. Like, it's 5, 6, 7 grand, I think. And that was just not something I was, you know, willing to part with. Not because I don't think that the medical care that they provide is important, but it was more, well, I can do it for free at the hospital. And I had a great first experience, so it's not bad. So we went through the midwifery group practice here in Brisbane. And again, I had a really beautiful midwife team. They were very supportive, and we had a beautiful second birth. Unfortunately, he wasn't a water birth this time round, because I had to be monitored for most of my labour, but only because I'd had fewer movements in the week leading up to that, and they were a bit cautious, which was great. So I'm really glad that they were cautious, and they said, we want to monitor you and make sure everything's fine. And he just slipped out, and there he was. And 2 hours later, I was like, can we go yet?
Oh my God. It's really refreshing, because I think, I speak to a lot of mums, and myself included, we've had birth trauma,
Yeah.
and so it's actually really nice to hear stories where it's been a nice birth, and that you were happy with the birth itself and the second one as well. I think that's really great. And I think we need those stories as well.
We do, but you know what? And I mean, because everyone likes, the drama, and of course, knowledge, can give power, right? And having knowledge of what can and can't go wrong, I think, is important to an extent. So, understanding limitations, or what would happen if you had to go through the emergency cesarean scenario, or if you had to, have an epidural. I think that those things are very important. But the way that we tell our birth stories is somewhat not helpful, I think, a lot of the time. But on the other hand, I don't share mine often, and it's only when I'm asked. And the reasons are very interesting, because I don't share them because while I feel great privilege and gratitude that I have been through 2 beautiful birth experiences, I also feel such guilt that I have. And mum guilt, right? It literally starts from birth or pregnancy. If you have a better pregnancy than someone, or, better birth than someone, it's, I'm honored that I've gone through that, but, it's different to someone else's experience. And I don't want to take away from their experience, because what they went through, but I also don't want to take away from mine. So I know more than this now, but a few months ago, I hosted a screening of the amazing documentary, and if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend Birth Time. So I think it's recently just gone onto streaming platforms, which is fantastic. But I hosted a session a few months ago at a local cinema, and I gave a speech beforehand. And I had worked out, of the 17 women, 17, so 17 women that I knew who had had a baby since my first child. So this is in the almost 4 years since having my first child. 17 of us, myself included, 11 of them have had cesarean sections. One of those was by choice. So 10 women had emergency cesareans in their birth out of 17. That's a very high statistic. Of the other 6, only 2 of them did not have some sort of birth trauma. 2 out of 17 women. And that to me is insane. I am one of those women. The other woman, she birthed in her shower at home by accident after having a 3-hour labor.
Wow.
And, while she feels she didn't have trauma at the time, has since had trauma with a second. And so I sit here living a beautiful, privileged life, having not had, the levels of trauma that others have. And so that gives me guilt. So I don't share my story often,
Wow.
even though I feel like it should be, because what I went through is actually normal. Like, statistically, I'm the average story, but you don't hear about it.
No. And I think be proud to share it, because I actually think it's really uplifting. And I've said this before, but I think we need to hear these stories too.
Absolutely.
Because the ones that are sitting with this birth trauma need to know that it doesn't have to be that way.
No.
And I think that's so. Actually, thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
I'd love to touch on, before we kind of finish up, how we started with how you had a really nurturing mother and she was really affectionate and you felt a lot of love. You said sheltered, but I wouldn't say sheltered. I'd say secure. You had a securely attached, I would say, childhood. And so how have you carried these principles into your own idea of motherhood? And what are your kind of rules that you live by to support your children in a way that makes you feel like they're also securely attached?
Well, it's a hard one, isn't it? Especially especially after you have come out of a dinner time like we have tonight, where someone requested gnocchi but didn't eat it.
Actually, you know what? Let's just use that exact scenario.
Oh.
That's real life, right?
Yeah.
When the shit hits the fan, how do you do it?
Oh, you know what? I think it changes.
I've watched you. I've seen your style. It's actually a really positive style to share. So I just want you to just talk as if like, let's put us at the dinner table and like, set the scene, because it's actually really encouraging.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's all about getting on their level. And so, you know, very much, you know, I don't ever want to be standing above my child when I'm trying to understand what they're going through or trying to tell them what to do. And also I find for me, it's a big process of checking myself. Is this actually important? Like, you know, yes, you have to go to the toilet. That's a need. Yes, you have to eat, because that's also a need that you need to fulfill. But, you know, am I telling you to put on, you know, one particular shoe because I prefer it over the other shoe? Well, that's a me thing. That's not a you thing. So I really try. My first step is to always get perspective over what's going on here. And the second thing is to get on their level. So physically make sure that I'm like face to face, you know, I'm not over them. There's no kind of intimidating body language there. Because I want to make sure that they know that I'm listening. And that's the third step, right? It's to actually listen. Because, you know, we've had these, what will sometimes turn into these screaming matches, or, you know, just eat your food, or you've got to eat your food before you eat something else, or you can't do this, and it can escalate, and there can be threats and, you know, maybe a timeout if it gets to that point. But, you know, I try really hard to understand what exactly the problem is. And sometimes it's as little as they haven't gone to the toilet for 2 hours because they forgot, or they were too immersed into play, and that's the issue. And, you know, tonight it was, you know, he just didn't want the gnocchi, even though he'd requested it. And we had checked 4 times. Are you going to eat this? And as soon as he saw what his brother was eating, which was leftover tacos, he went, well, I want that. And we said, but we asked you. Well, I want that. I've changed my mind. And which is annoying, because we had had a conversation about it's okay to change your mind at lunchtime. So, you know, you get to a point where you go,
did he get the tacos?
His brother very generously offered up some tacos. So I think I was saved from just throwing it all in and going, this is ridiculous. Yeah. He ate 5 pieces of gnocchi, and then he got a banana. Is it worth it? I don't know. Look, the kid eats a healthy enough, you know, he eats a variety of food most of the time. If he eats Wheat Bix for 3 nights, you know, dinner in a row, it's Wheat Bix with yogurt and fruit. He's not having Fruit Loops with, you know, not that there's anything wrong with that on occasion either. Yeah, you know, it's not.
No judgment.
Exactly. So he eats a relatively healthy thing. If he's going to have some gnocchi and a banana for dinner to just get into bed and be fed, it is what it is.
It's sort of, it's so much about like the context, and I love it. It's like a child has a tantrum, not because they're bad, but because they're trying to make sense of like this situation, and in their mind they haven't connected why they didn't know tacos was the option in that moment.
Exactly.
And are we not similar?
Absolutely. And that's, you know, that's why I say my first step is to check myself. Is this actually a priority of mine? Am I forcing my will on someone else, regardless of their age? You know, is this really important at this one time? And sometimes it's like, look, we're going to be late for swimming if you don't get in the car right now. This was an earlier episode today. And you know what? I got to the point where I was like, well, that's all right. We'll just stay home. We've missed it. It's done. That's it. You know, oh no, but I want to go. Okay, great. So we were 15 minutes late for a 25-minute lesson.
The concept of time is so abstract, right, for all of us, but like children, when you're, and I recognize in myself, like I'm always like, quick Ziggy, quick, hurry up Ziggy, and like what am I instilling in him? Like this panic to adhere to time. Yeah, I totally get that. Can you I was just going to ask you, what have you, like you said, getting on their level, being, you know, looking at the situation, are they sort of things that you've learnt yourself? Like what's popped up for you becoming a mum that's made you start to become aware of your behaviors and the way that you're interacting with your child?
Yeah, I suppose, I mean, you know, on Facebook, Instagram, you know, you're fed all of these kind of, so there's a lot of articles where they say, you know, your child's having a tantrum, what do you do? So I suppose there's little tidbits that you get from lots of these things. But actually, this is a funny one. The whole getting like physically on my child's level came from two different things. And the first is what triggered it is I saw a photo in, I don't know, some website, I have no idea, of Kate Middleton, the was she Duchess, Cambridge?
Yeah.
Of her and one of the kids, maybe George, had a tantrum on a plane and they'd arrived somewhere and she was literally on a tarmac, and this photo of her, and she was face to face with him, kneeling down in her beautiful shoes, on her beautiful dress, dragging on the tarmac, you know, on his level. And this article was talking about how getting on your child level, no matter who you are or where you are or what official dignitary is waiting for your arrival on a red carpet, like this is your child, and that is what is important in this space right now. And I was like, wow, that's pretty mind-blowing. But what really struck me about it is that I've got that exact photo of my mum doing that to me when I was about 1. And we were traveling and they took me overseas when I was 12 months. And there's this beautiful photo of my mum at my level, kneeling down, and I, you know, had an upsetting day or something, and she was there on my level, and she was, you know, and it's this beautiful photo. And she wrote, she gave me this photo when I was getting married, and said, you know, this was a very important moment to me. I realized how special you were, and I'm teary. But it was just, and so I relate to that, and I'm like, get on their level, you know, have that relationship with them, build that trust, make sure they know that you're listening to them, and actually listen. Though, you know, it's, you think, oh, you know, they're having a tantrum about this, having a tantrum about that, and then sometimes you understand, you know, what's going on. Arthur, my 4-year-old, caught a praying mantis the other day, and he was so excited. We put it in the bug catcher. And he took it away and he had it in his room, and we tried to feed it fruit flies for a few days. And then after 3 days, I went, right, I think we're going to have to let him go. He needs food and water outside of our house. And Arthur finally went, okay, Mum, yep, all right. And he was very sad. And so we went out together into the night to release him into the garden. And we're halfway down the stairs, and Arthur goes, Mummy, do you think he really didn't like being my friend and being at my house? And I was like, is this what you're sad about? And he was like, well, yeah. I said, no, he, you know, of course he loved being your friend, and, you know, he loved being here and seeing how you live and eat and stuff, but he wants to go and spend time with his family and his friends and, you know, eat with them, and you know, maybe he can bring them back to visit you. And he immediately went, oh, okay, you know, yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
And I just felt like he would not have given me that information had we not had, you know, had he not felt comfortable sharing that with me and understanding that I would listen to him and get it.
That's so
yeah. So we understood why he was upset, and we could, you know, work on that, and that was really nice.
It's the language around that, isn't it? Like how you get on the level, you speak, you kind of encourage them, help them with naming the feelings and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. It's funny, like it's not rocket science. It's actually how we want to be talked to. It's how we want to be listened to. And it's sort of like, I just think about that now. I'm like, is this, you know, am I showing up for him the way that I want to show up for myself, or I want to be, you know, received by somebody else?
Absolutely.
And like they're just little tiny adults growing, right?
And their brain hasn't formed enough to understand the concept of consequence or punishment, or and so sometimes it's checking myself, oh well, they're not going to understand if I take a toy away from them because they were late for something. Like for
Yeah.
that doesn't make sense. And
Yeah.
in saying that, sometimes it also works. I'm not saying what I do works every time,
Hard, isn't it?
because it definitely does not, but it's something I really try and follow as much as I can.
Yeah, and I think that's great. Like I was just even thinking, I think it was this morning, Siggy said something like, what did he say? Something, we can't do that because that makes mummy sad. And I was like, oh, darling, like, sorry, no, it doesn't make, you know what I mean? It's just like, because you don't, it's this very fine line of like, they're not responsible for your feelings.
Absolutely.
They're responsible for them. And we too often grow up and feel responsible for everybody else's feelings around us because we've been told as small children, like, don't do that because mum will get angry, or don't do that because or mummy's sad because you messed up your room. That's what it was messed up your room. You have to tidy up because mummy will be sad. I was like, oh goodness, that's my OCD that's come out. I was like, no, I won't be sad. It's just good practice to clean your room.
Yeah.
Like, do you
prefer, because you can find your toys.
Like, I was like, do you prefer it messy? He's like, well, yeah. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll just clean it up for you.
Oh, it's like that, isn't it?
We've got things to learn, but let's finish with you've given us a few tools. I'll put them in the notes, but any amazing resources or tools that have come for you as a woman, as a mother, that you can share?
Well, I suppose I've mentioned a few. So Expectant Mothers, Birth Time, the documentary, it is amazing. It's uplifting, it's empowering. I think every woman, every person, politician should see it, because there needs to be movement of things changing there in that space, and it's great. And the book that I mentioned, so Gentle Birth, Gentle Mothering. I never quite got to the mothering section of it. Probably should, but I hear it's good. So that's definitely one. I think like having a community of people who lift you up and allow you to, not only speak, have those rants and just let go. Oh, today was really awful and my kid was being shit, or whatever it is. Have that safe space, but also have a safe space to go, actually, something really awesome happened today, because we need to talk about those positive stories. And we need that community. And I tell you what, I recommend it to everyone I can, but Mama Got Skills.
Oh, stop.
I'm not joking. I mean, I was coming long after my kid was in daycare, right? I was still coming to those things. And because just having that network of other women, especially, who can uplift you and, can just be that source of comfort, or or just let you sit and listen for a moment. And I just think having a strong community around you is so important.
Yeah, I agree. Well said. Thank you so much for joining me.
No, thank you. It was absolute pleasure. And
like, we don't know where it's going to go, and it just like we went. It was about birth, this one, and
yeah,
that's
I think
cool.
So.
I think it's necessary and positive birth. So, well, I love the takeaway for me is that I felt confident to birth in my body.
I did.
Yeah.
And I think that every woman should be given that chance. I really do. And maybe it's, we bring it back to doing something similar like Birthing on Country. For those who don't know, but Birthing on Country is mainly for Indigenous women. Some fantastic services that the Charles Darwin University have brought out for particularly Indigenous women, and helping them birth, in the way that they should, and with their aunties and their grandmothers and their community around them, rather than being shipped off to a hospital to do stuff that they don't want to do. And so having, again, it comes back to community, and and having those safe spaces. And for birth, it's particularly important, I think. So
great. Awesome. Thank you for joining me. It's been a pleasure.
It's been wonderful. Thank you so much. Have a good night.